Let's forget about COVID-19 for a moment and think about the other pandemic that is sweeping this world, where every single country on earth has been affected by it. And overall, 70 million people have come down with this virus. And of that 70 million, 32 million have died from it. That's a terrible toll of human lives and suffering. Ray Stevens was a songwriter. I guess he's still alive, I'm not sure. But Ray Stevens wrote a song by the name of The Blue Cyclone. Now, he was known for his comedic songs. Most of them had comedy in them. And in this particular one, the Blue Cyclone is a wrestler. And at one point, he makes the statement, "Some people never learn." And in many ways, that's the human race. We never seem to learn. Because with HIV and AIDS, we find that we've never learned our lesson from two different distinct points of view. The first is, how did this get into the human race in the first place? And secondarily, how does it perpetuate? To understand how it got into the human race, I'd like to read from a couple sources. The first one is the AIDS Institute. And it asks the question, where did HIV come from? Scientists identified a type of chimpanzee in West Africa as the source of HIV infection in humans. They believe that the chimpanzee version of the immunodeficiency virus, called simian immunodeficiency virus, or SIV, most likely was transmitted to humans and mutated into HIV when humans hunted these chimpanzees for meat and came into contact with their infected blood. Over decades, the virus slowly spread across Africa and later into other parts of the world. Do you get that, my friends? He says they hunted these chimpanzees for meat and they came in contact with them in that way. That's from the AIDS Institute. But let's notice from the National Institute of Health.org website, where it says how humans acquired the 8 precursors of HIV-1 groups M, N, O, and P is not known. However, based on the biology of these viruses, transmission must have occurred through cutaneous or mucous membrane exposure to infected ape blood and or body fluids. Such exposures occur most commonly in the context of bushmeat hunting and other people eating primates. Now, it shouldn't be surprising, but it is for most people to realize, as I've brought out in some of these other videos, that the God of the Bible, our Creator, gave us a list of animals that he said were not fit for human consumption, and among them are apes. And when we look at the other pandemics and epidemics that have started in recent years, whether we go all the way back 100 years to the 1918 pandemic, which they know was a type of a swine flu, or whether we look more recently to Ebola, which involved bats and primates, or MERS, which involved bats and camels, or Nipah virus, which involved bats and pigs, or SARS, which again involved bats, but an intermediary as well, we find that all of these terrible diseases have come from animals, and it's not just any animal, it's the animals that God said, leave alone. Now, God said that we can eat meat, and he tells us which ones we can eat, and he says others we should leave alone. Why do we have to go so many thousands of years before we finally figure out that what God said makes sense? At least it makes sense if you look at the facts and not just look at your stomach or your palate and decide what you want to eat that way. The HIV virus apparently has come from primates that were hunted in Africa. It got into the human race. That's the first problem, a violation of God's law. But secondarily, we have spread it by another violation of God's law. Let's go back to the National Institute of Health. It says a retrovirus, now termed human immunodeficiency virus type 1, or HIV-1, was subsequently identified as the causative agent of what has since become one of the most devastating infectious diseases to have emerged in recent history. 80% of adults acquire HIV-1 following exposure at mucosal surfaces, and AIDS is thus primarily a sexually transmitted disease. Now, you've known that, and I've known that, but it's the first politically correct sexually transmitted disease because we don't want to blame it on a certain behavior. And yet, it is the result of behaviors that violate the laws of God. So Ray Stevens was right when he wrote The Blue Cyclone. Some people just never learn. And the human race never seems to learn that what God says we should eat and shouldn't eat would be good for us to follow. And when it comes to behaviors, there are certain behaviors that are only going to bring sorrow and heartache and terrible suffering. HIV/AIDS is a terrible pandemic that has swept the world, infecting 70 million people and killing 32 million with a horrible death. How long is it going to take us to learn that God knows best? This is Gerald Weston for Tomorrow's World, May the 5th, 2020. I hope you have a wonderful day.